Welcome to Season 2 of the Making Bank podcast, where we continue our exploration of South Florida's entrepreneurial landscape with host Keith Costello, co-founder and CEO of Locality Bank. Sit back, relax, and let South Florida visionaries guide you on an entrepreneurial journey from tribulation to triumph, sharing the very stories that have shaped them.
Michael Manglardi, welcome to Locality Bank's Making Bank podcast.
Thanks, Keith. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're glad you could join us today. So, really cool story, really cool business. I have to say, I didn't even know what pickleball was, 2 years ago, and I'm sure I'm not alone. Like, what's happened with pickleball is incredible, and we'll get into all that. But what an interesting phenomena the whole sport has become. So, I usually like to start going back, and you're a fairly young guy, but you still have a start, right? Where'd you grow up, and tell me about growing up in your family, what it was like, and that type of thing.
Yeah, so I grew up in Central Florida in the Winter Springs, Oviedo area, which at the time was a pretty small area, about 45 minutes outside of downtown Orlando. And since then, it's grown just like most parts of Florida. I grew up in a house of boys. I'm one of 4 boys. So our house.
God bless your mother.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the people that has absolutely made me who I am. But yeah, my mom had just endless amounts of driving to soccer practice, picking up for football practice, making lunches, making dinner. I can't even wrap my mind around how busy those years must have been for her. So I grew up with a house full of boys that was ultra competitive, all sports in our household. And my dad is an entrepreneur himself. He is a first generation college graduate. He went to law school and then started his own law firm. And so on top of being around such a great and supportive family that was always fun, I also had my dad's entrepreneurial perspective on pretty much everything that we did. And I kind of got to see firsthand, him building his business, which was very cool. So born and raised in Central Florida, I went to the University of Central Florida, which is about 15 minutes away from where I grew up. So I didn't venture too far from there. Did what most college kids that don't know what they want to do with their career do, and they studied business.
Right.
So I went to business school, and by the time it was time for me to graduate, I had to figure out what was next. My girlfriend, who I'm still with, my girlfriend at that time was from down here in South Florida, and she said, "Hey, let's get out of Orlando. Let's head south." I'd been to Fort Lauderdale once or twice at that point, and I said, sure, why not? And so...
What year is this?
This was 2016.
2016?
Yep,
okay.
2016. We packed it up and moved down south, and that was when what most people would call the real world started.
Yeah. So what'd you end up doing when you moved back or moved down here to Fort Lauderdale?
Yeah, to Fort Lauderdale, yep. So like I'd said, I didn't really know what I wanted to do long term. I didn't know what that career path was for me. Sure. What I did know is that I loved business. I loved the idea of starting businesses and building businesses. And I knew that I needed to build a skill set to be able to do that. I don't think at that point in time, at 21 years old, with a couple of jobs and internships I had, I knew enough to be able to start a business.
Sure.
And so the most obvious skill set that I wanted to learn was how to sell. A secondary industry that I wanted to get familiar with was the technology industry. And so, I looked at those 2 categories and tried to find where there would be an overlap and where I could learn about both of those skills. And so my first job right out of college was in technical consulting and basically building out specialized teams of technical resources to go in and build projects for all of our clients. And this is through a company that's still based here in South Florida. And it was actually started by another former UCF graduate. And so I did that for about 18 months.
What was the name of that company?
That company was Skillstorm. Yep. And they're still very active down here in South Florida, and they've got a great leadership team. a lot of UCF folks that
cool.
ended up getting involved with the business. And that gave me the opportunity to learn all about the world of technology and all of the cutting edge softwares that were being built, coding languages that were being used. And at the same time, it taught me how to sell because we were basically selling this project to the people that were going to execute, the developers, the project managers, the technical architects.
Was that a focus primarily on South Florida, or was it national?
No, that was national.
Oh,
but
national.
We focused primarily on financial institutions.
Okay.
So we were working quite a bit with like Bank of America and Wells Fargo.
Okay.
And some of these big financial institutions.
They're not quite as famous as Locality.
Not quite, right?
But I've heard of them.
And I didn't get to sit down with their leadership team like I get to do with you guys. So what I was able to learn indirectly from that job was how to hire. And that was a skill that I hadn't really thought much about at that point in my career. But looking back at it was probably the most important thing that I could have learned is how to talk to people, how to understand their skill sets, how to qualify if they're going to be able to do what needs to be done for that job. And if they check all of those boxes, ultimately selling them on why they should work with me or the project or the company rather than one of our competitors. So that was a really great experience. I knew that that wasn't the long-term role for me, but it gave me what I needed to learn to get started.
That's super interesting because you talk about selling, and I think about I came up like really on the sales side of banking, but now same thing. Like so, I use those same skills recruiting great talent because I think that is how you really put together a great company. So that was a great, very forward thinking of you to pick up on that and to recognize that you could use that skill, later on.
Yeah, and I can't take all of the credit there. So one of the mentors that I've had for the last 9 years is actually my girlfriend, Taylor Roshman, her dad, Jeff Roshman, who is a entrepreneur, is very, very involved in the South Florida business community, and really just an awesome individual all around. And he was one of the people that, as I was getting ready to start my career, brought up some of those points like, well, what do you want to learn? Where can you maximize your skill sets? Where can you learn in the fastest possible way? And so through a lot of conversations with him, that was what brought me to that first role in the technology world.
Interesting. So he was grilling you like, hey, if you want to do this, like go get this skill, go find out how to do this.
I think he was also grilling me because he wanted to make sure that his daughter wasn't dating a bozo, but we can say whatever we want to say for the sake of this interview. But yes, he was a huge part in mentoring me and guiding me along that path.
Interesting. Well, that's great. So you're working at Skillstorm, and that's going well. You're doing well, and then what leads you to your next step?
So the next step was I had built these skills. I felt pretty confident around them, and I really wanted to get more into the startup world and the business management, business operations, and learning how to run an organization or be involved in the management part of running organizations. And so that was when I went over and started working with Jeff Roshman and his portfolio of businesses. One in particular that we really focused in on was the construction business, and we were doing a lot of high-rise exterior work, so like concrete restoration, stucco, painting, contractor services, and that industry and specifically that company was really dependent on operations,
right.
So project management, making sure schedules are in line, making sure people are where they say they're going to be, organizing, all of the different subcontractors and all of the moving parts to make sure that you're, hitting your deadlines, so that this project can continue to move on and grow and finish.
And what company was that?
It was a company called RS Florida that since then has turned more into a custom home building company.
Oh, interesting.
So we scaled down the commercial work and then pivoted into residential. And I'm no longer involved with that part of the business because this crazy thing called Diadem came along. But that was what brought us to Diadem and really getting that business started.
Interesting. So how did that happen?
So there was these two guys. They were the two other co-founders of Diadem. Their names are Evan Specht and AJ Bartlett. And work with them every single day. They're still very much involved with Diadem. I think you guys have both met them. But in 2015, they had this idea for a tennis brand. They had both been former tennis pros, played at a very, very high level. And then they had gotten into the coaching world, both with high performance juniors and then also with your recreational country club players. And they had this idea for a tennis brand focused on the strings. Probably the least sexy, least exciting product category in the industry. But they had this idea that they had put into movement, and they had been building it somewhat as a sideline business for a couple of years. And that was when they had met me and met Jeff through their quest to find additional partners. They wanted a little bit of support on the capital side, and they really wanted to make Diadem a legitimate, full-blown business that could scale and grow and not just be the moonlight part-time business that it had been up to that point.
But it started out tennis.
Started out 100% tennis, and more specifically, tennis string. So
tennis
string. So the actual string that you put in the racket, and a lot of people—
That's what they were—
Yeah.
It was just about the string.
Just about the string.
Oh,
That's
wow.
it. And a lot of people that don't play tennis don't even know that the string is interchangeable. I remember telling my dad, hey, we're talking with these guys. We're looking at building this tennis business, sports equipment. It's pretty cool. They've got a really great string product. And he's like, well, when I go to Walmart, all the rackets already have string in them. Why would I ever buy string? Like, he didn't even know that, high level players can break their string every 4 or 5 hours, a couple times a week, and they're constantly changing out that string. And so that was the market that they were attacking.
So
first.
A very, very niche market. Obviously for those really top pro tennis players.
Anybody that's playing competitive tennis, even juniors, but you're playing multiple times a week at a high level, you're breaking string. Otherwise, your typical weekend club player, they might never break a string.
Right. And so this is kind of, you guys start getting involved with them in conversations. What year is this? So
in 2018, going into 2019, we started working with the two of them. They had 0 employees. We're a very, very small product line. They were still teaching tennis and coaching, doing a lot of other things to support themselves and make a living, because Diadem at that point wasn't able to do that.
Right.
And so when the 4 of us started working on it together, we decided, let's turn this thing into a real business. They had built out a pretty impressive product line at that point. They had some early stage rackets, some accessories like bags and grips and that type of stuff. And we were really ready to make Diadem a legitimate mainstream tennis brand. And so in 2019, we turned all of our focus towards Diadem, and that was what I put all of my time and energy into doing and building out this new business that was going to be fighting a lot of legacy brands that dominate the tennis industry.
Right. So how did that go?
So it's a challenge for sure. And if we did what the big brands do, we would have never made it, And so people would always say well, Wilson does things this way. Why don't you guys do it like that? And our response is, if we did things the same way that Wilson does things, we'd be out of business, because then why would you come see us? So we started by going after some real niche customer types. You talked about string and how that's a pretty unknown product group. So we targeted the stringers, the guys that actually put the string in the racket. And so we found stringers across the country, and we reached out to them the old-fashioned way, cold called them, and asked if they wanted to partner with us. Once we started to get a little bit of momentum with the stringers, then we turned towards teaching pros. So the people that are giving lessons to anywhere from 30 to 50 clients a week. And we were going to them saying, we'd like to partner with you. We have great product. We'll let you try the product. You don't even have to buy it. Just give it a try, demo it. And if you like it and you trust in it, put it in your client's hands and see what they have to say. And so we started signing on what some people would call ambassadors. We call them our premier team. And these are all people that have influence in micro markets, their network of, say, 50 private lesson clients. But those people were now putting Diadem in all of their hands. And that's a very different model where a lot of the big brands load up on like the traditional brick and mortar retail. They spend a ton of money on advertising and they say, if you want to buy our racket, go to that store and go buy it. Right. We were trying to do more of a grassroots approach where we were putting the product directly into their hands and letting them basically taste it for themselves before they had to commit to anything.
And I'm making notes of that because I think that's great advice for anybody who's building a business, right? Like just to say, hey, we'd like to partner with you. That's a powerful phrase, right? It's not like, hey, we want to sell you something or here, buy this, hey, we'd like to partner with you. Yeah. I love that. That's I jotted that down. In any business, that's a great way to think about what you're doing and how you grow it. So you're in this tennis space and you guys are, working on that and you're making some progress,
for
right?
Sure. Yep.
And so how does pickleball, when does that come into the picture?
Yeah, so pickleball comes a little bit later in the story. So in 2019, we were growing, we were seeing this traction. It was still just myself and the two other co-founders that were doing all the day-to-day. So it was literally,
so three of you.
If I sold you a tennis racket, I'd hang up the phone, go put it into our CRM, then run to the warehouse and put the tennis racket into the box to make sure that it got shipped out to you. So we were still doing everything ourselves. And we were putting a big emphasis on another category of customers, and that's junior tennis players. Mm-hmm. And that was something that had already started to work well for us, was sponsoring these kids. And sponsoring could mean free product or it could mean just discounted product. But we were starting to build this army of junior tennis players, anywhere from 12 to 18 years old, that were very good. And we've turned that program into what we now call our dynasty team. But at the time, it was just our junior program. And what we were seeing is that maybe we weren't a brand that you would see on TV or you would see at every tennis store around the country. But if you went to a junior tournament in Birmingham, Alabama, and the best kid there, maybe the best 13-year-old, was using Diadem, that had a ripple effect in that community where the other 13-year-olds and the other 12-year-olds were looking at Johnny saying, well, he's winning, he's using Diadem, we want to be a part of that.
Wow.
So then fast forward to 2020, we brought on a couple of salespeople. We felt really good with the growth that we were seeing. And we said, all right, let's bring on some employees and really push this sales thing hard. And everybody here knows how that story ended. March of 2020, the world shut down, right? And COVID destroyed tons and tons of businesses, particularly the recreation sports, right, and the sports that were focused around schools. Mm-hmm. Schools weren't playing any team sports, so tennis season didn't exist. The summer camps didn't exist, but we didn't waver from our model. We worked from home for whatever it was, 2 months, and said, let's keep building these relationships and building these partnerships. And we know that things will open up and get better. And of course they did. And once they did, tennis grew faster than it's ever grown. More people wanted to play outside. More parents wanted their kids out of the house. And so tennis saw this really unique boom. And at the same time, this crazy sport called pickleball basically went viral. And this was late 2020, early 2021. Yeah. And at that point, pickleball had already been on our radar. It had been something that we had seen and heard about. It was still kind of known as that retirement community sport, but it was changing. And we had some prototypes for paddles already. But at the end of 2020, we decided, let's really invest some energy into making some great pickleball paddles and see if we can do things different from what's already out there. So back to your original question, April of 2021, Diadem launched into the pickleball space. We launched with our first paddle. And we really wanted to kind of slow launch it or soft launch it, just because it was our first step into this entirely new category. And so we started with a paddle called the Icon. We started with small quantities, and almost immediately they sold out. And part of that was because pickleball was booming, but part of it was because we realized that our paddles were very, very good and our competitors weren't quite as good. And we knew that from our manufacturing process, but we didn't know if the consumer was going to recognize it. There was still a lot of lack of education among pickleball players because it was just so new.
Yeah.
But from April till about July, we just made paddles, brought them in, sold out immediately, and started making the next batch. I mean, it was really just crazy how explosive that part of the business started growing and how receptive people were to a new brand like Diadem, where in tennis, we were fighting these legacy brands. And every time we talk to somebody, they go, who's Diadem? What do you guys do? Why have I never heard of you? You know, how are you going to be better than Wilson Babolat Head? In pickleball, there was no brand loyalty because everybody was new. So people saw a new brand and they said, oh, that's kind of cool. And then they tried the paddle and it was very good. And they're like, all right, I'm with Team Diadem. I like you guys. I like your product. That's going to be the brand that I support. And so that was where we saw a really big shift from the consumer in the tennis world versus the consumer in the pickleball world.
Wow. So that's incredible. So, and then as, and I know like you've had some just incredible, like you showed me, like basically who is it? Like Gronk.
Celebrities.
Celebrities posting their Diadem pics like for pickleball, and like tell us about that. Like,
yeah. So the beauty of pickleball is it's a sport for everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. And, you know, I think you and a lot of your team members here have played. Anybody that's anywhere in the US has heard about pickleball at this point. And the beauty of it is that it's very easy to pick up. It's very accessible. You don't need, you know, an expensive golf bag with $1,000 clubs. You don't need a country club membership to get on a court. And the learning curve is very, very fast, meaning that, you know, if you never played pickleball before, if you went out and played 3 or 4 times, you'd immediately see major, major improvements in your game. And so that's what makes it so attractive.
So way different than golf.
Completely different from golf, completely different from tennis,
Yeah.
that are ultra technical sports that people spend a lifetime trying to learn.
Right.
Pickleball, you know, you and I could go out right now and play points and we could have fun and be competitive. And so, you know, parents and their kids are starting to play, husbands and wives are playing together, grandparents and grandkids are going out to the courts. And that's something that you rarely see with other racket sports or lifetime sports like golf or tennis. So the celebrities all started flooding to pickleball. You had Tim Tebow playing. You've got a bunch of big names that are investing into pro teams and the pro tour, like Tom Brady. You've got baseball and basketball players playing in the off season, which I know their coaches and general management probably doesn't love, but just through our paddles being accessible, we started seeing all these different celebrities that are using our stuff. Chad Ochocinco was posting on his social media the other day that he's all in on Team Diadem because he found you know, our rackets and our paddles. And so it's really just cool to see that roster of celebrities and your everyday celebrities grow. And I think that's just because of the beauty of pickleball as a sport.
And what's the average price point for, you know, a racket?
It's all over the place. So you could go to the store and you could buy a paddle for $15-20.
Yeah.
You could buy a paddle for $300. So where Diadem really specializes is we gear more towards the performance paddles. So a lot of the paddles that you'll see of ours are going to be in that $175 to $225 price range, which would fall under that performance category. And that's where most of your top of the line paddles are going to fall.
Right.
And that's where we want to be. We've always been a brand focused on cutting edge technology, innovation, and really high end materials and construction. And so it makes sense for us to focus more in that category for pickleball rather than to just make the cheapest we can possibly make and try to sell it at bulk.
Right. So with the manufacturing process and getting these paddles made and everything, and there's been a lot of supply chain issues like in 2020, 2021. Did that affect you guys particularly, or?
Yeah, it did. That was a big challenge for us in really not so much 2020, but 2021 was a really big challenge with manufacturing and supply chain. The biggest one was actually tennis balls. Tennis balls were in global short supply. I mean, anywhere you went in the world, people were struggling to find tennis balls. And that was actually how we captured a really nice piece of tennis market share during that time, because we just so happened to have tennis balls and a lot of our competitors did not. And so the people that we had been calling in 2019 trying to sell balls to, that were saying, hey, I'm set with whatever partner I already have, we're now saying, oh my gosh, you guys are saving my summer program. I've called all of my normal reps. None of them have tennis balls. Can you send me balls? When's the soonest I could have them? And we were winning over a lot of customers that way because we had product when a lot of our competitors did not.
Wow. So from a standpoint of, you already mentioned, obviously you had a great mentor. And that's important. We find that with most everybody we talk to. I've got somebody there that they can bounce things kind of off of. And then I guess through your experience with Diadem, what so there was a supply chain issue, some of these other things. What's one failure or one really stress point that you hit since you've been involved with Diadem?
Yeah, the biggest stress point, and I don't know that I would consider it a failure, but it was certainly tough for the business, was those first few months of COVID, because we had just started to see a few small bits of success. Mm-hmm. We were growing. We had just launched our tennis ball. We had hired a couple of our first salespeople. And then all of a sudden there was just such uncertainty across the world. And, the big businesses, they're going to make it work. They can figure it out. They would lay people off and do what they have to do, but they would get to the other side. For us, it was like, we looked at weeks and weeks where our revenue was going down, and the people that we were calling and talking to were saying things like, hey, I appreciate you reaching out. I would love to partner with you guys. I can't teach tennis, or our courts are closed, or my season got canceled. So that was a big challenge for us. We stayed the course and we kept grinding and just knowing that eventually it would get better, but we didn't know when, and we didn't know what it was going to look like on the other end. Like what was the brand landscape going to be? What were our factories going to be able to do with all of the supply challenges that we knew were coming? So that was certainly a challenge. The other challenge that we've seen is just growing in general. And again, it wouldn't be a failure, but it would be something that all small businesses, I'm sure, deal with. And that's, you get to the point where the three of us couldn't be doing everything ourselves. We had to have salespeople. We had to have a shipping department. We had to have marketing. And it's making sure that you're finding the right team members, empowering those team members, which we've done a pretty good job of doing, and giving them ownership of projects. And I give our team a ton of credit because we're small. We're at about 30 employees now, but everybody there has a lot on their plate. And I believe they truly care about Diadem as a brand. There's not a lot of the typical 9-to-5ers that are just clocking in, clocking out, and going on with their life.
So that's really interesting to me too, because we're at about 30 employees too. So we're at the same stage. And I would say the same thing about our team too. So the challenge for both of us is how do you take that to 100, 200 employees and still maintain that same kind of entrepreneurial drive? And what are your thoughts on that? How do you scale and still keep that kind of mojo?
It's a huge challenge for sure. I mean, when you start looking at 100 plus employees, it's hard to expect that 101st employee to care as much as the first employee or the third employee or the fifth employee. And I think that comes down to, the culture that you build. The hiring process, of course, is important because even if we do get to the point where we have 100 employees, we're still going to operate kind of in that startup mentality. And so looking for people that thrive in those environments, I think give you an advantage in building that culture. But it's going to really come down to finding the right talent, continuing to empower that talent and give them the ability to do what you hired them to do, and keep it exciting, And so for Diadem, we've had some success in tennis and we've had some success in pickleball over the last couple of years, but we don't think we're anywhere close to what our potential should be. We see ourselves as a sports company, not a tennis company, not a pickleball company. And what that means is we're going to have new divisions of the brand launching. And one example of that is next year, we're going to be launching footwear. And so we'll have our first court shoe. And that's going to be a whole new piece of energy and excitement that we can bring to the team because it's within this Diadem umbrella, but it's something entirely different from all of our existing products.
So cool. And so in terms of like getting financing and that type of thing, so you've had to do that. Tell us about how that's worked for you.
Yeah, so most of the business had been bootstrapped for a lot of the early years. And then when Jeff Roshman and myself got involved, Jeff brought a little bit of money to the company to help fund inventory, really, and just start that growth process. It's hard to grow if you don't have product.
Right.
But then in 2021, we were having success growing and we were hiring and we started to identify a need for more capital. And we knew that we weren't going to stop growing anytime soon. And so those capital needs were only going to get bigger. And that was when we started looking at real banking partners that we'd be able to work with that might be able to get us some accessibility to capital to allow us to continue to grow.
And how'd that go?
Well, it was great. If it didn't,
where that question was going.
Go well, then we wouldn't be sitting here right now. But the Locality team was awesome to deal with. You guys came in and really learned the Diadem business, learned what we were trying to do, and really where we wanted to go. What was different with Locality than some of the other banks that we spoke with is you guys were very concerned with what we were doing today, but you were almost more concerned about where we were going to be tomorrow and what our needs were going to be when we got there. And I thought that was really impressive and just a really solid understanding of the business and an interest in the business was what set Locality apart. And of course, you guys have been a partner with us for now, I guess, 2 years plus. And things have been just really great. And it's been cool to see that as we've grown, you guys have also grown, and your support for Diadem has been able to grow with our needs.
Yeah, so let's hope we can keep doing that together. We try not to make these podcasts self-promotional, but in this case, we couldn't help it. And it's nice to be able to do once in a while. So, I can say on behalf of you guys have been great to work with too. So it's a great partnership, and that's how we love to do things. So, what advice would you have to that 21-year-old graduate from UCF or that, anybody else out there who's kind of where you were when you started on your journey and you got some good advice from Jeff Roshman? What advice would you give?
Yeah, the number one piece of advice I give to college graduates that want to get into business is learn how to sell something. I think it's such a valuable skill that you can take anywhere, whether you want to be a salesperson or you want to be a manager or you want to start your own business. There's going to be a point in time where you have to sell something. And so I think that skill is just so important to learn as early in your career as possible. And then the other piece that I really embraced in those early 20s was getting comfortable being uncomfortable, and taking on challenges or opportunities that maybe weren't fully within my comfort zone, and just embracing the fact of, hey, I'm going to figure it out. We're going to go in there and learn as much as we can and piece it all together and embrace that area outside your comfort zone.
I think that's great. I like that quote. No one ever achieves anything exceptional staying in their comfort zone.
And that's the story of Diadem, right? If we would have just stayed safe and stayed comfortable, we wouldn't be in business.
Yeah. No, it's a story of I think most successful businesses is getting outside your comfort zone being innovative and creative. So we're going to flip now to the lightning round, which is, just some quick answers. We're going to throw some quick questions at you and just, quick answers.
Let's do it.
What's your favorite book?
My favorite book is Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. Yeah, it's a great book. Actually read it prior to Diadem and getting the sports business started. But now it's more relevant than ever. It's sports, it's business, it's great.
No, that is a phenomenal book. We're going to add that one to our library, which we have out here with all the podcast guests' books, favorite books. So what about a fear that you've overcome?
I wouldn't necessarily say it was a big fear, but early in my career and even going back to when I was in college, I instinctually am very analytical, and I like to take information, really comprehend it, really kind of move slow on it, and then take action. And I think something that I had to force myself to change a little bit is, in the startup and small business world, you have to be able to take action, and you have to rely on your instincts. And so getting past that fear of the unknown, or that need to really analyze every situation and instead just start taking action. Taking
action without having 100% of the information, right?
Right.
Yeah,
because you're never going to know 100%.
Exactly.
It's impossible.
Yeah, that's a good one. How about, what's the best advice that you have received?
I think consistency is key. So anytime that you're getting into something new, you got to show up, and whether it's a job or a relationship or starting a business, you have to be consistent. You have to show up. You have to be there. There's going to be good days. There's going to be bad days. But consistency is key.
When you're saying these things, I'm thinking of all these quotes so consistency trumps intensity is another one of my favorites.
So I don't have any of these quotes memorized.
Well, they're just
I have
popping up.
The Spark Note version in my mind, and that's all I can remember.
Well, you got the concepts, because it's making me think of all these things. But that's also like a training, for working out or physical,
Exactly.
It's a great one too. So who is a person that you would like to have dinner with, living or dead?
Oof, that's a great question. The easy answer, but I think would be relevant, is Steve Jobs. Why not? That's got to be a great dinner. Yeah. I'd let him pick the restaurant and see what he's got to say.
All right, so that's going to lead us right to the next one. What's your favorite restaurant?
My favorite restaurant down here in South Florida is Heritage. So it's over in Flagler Village. It's a pizza Italian spot. Unbelievable food, really cool vibe, but it's not overly stuffy. The food is just awesome. So Heritage Pizza.
So is that like locally owned?
Yeah. I think the guy maybe owns another couple of restaurants down here in the area, but he's a local guy with a local team.
Interesting.
It's really, really good. You got to check it out.
I actually have heard some people give good reviews about that place as well. So what do you do for a hobby or to relieve stress, or when you're not working?
Yeah, I'm a big sports guy, which goes hand in hand with Diadem and the business. But when I'm not at the office, I love to play tennis, love to play pickleball, play a little bit of golf, not very good at it, but play nonetheless. Working out and spending time with my girlfriend. She's been a great part of this whole process, because she's insanely supportive and understands the long hours and the long days. And so when I do have the downtime and her and I get to sit down and watch a show on Netflix or just kick back for a little bit, that's definitely nice.
Cool. So any particular thing on Netflix you're watching right now that's good?
Not Netflix, but we just finished Succession.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you saw that, but it's probably a top 5 show of all time.
Yeah,
just a great show. And they just wrapped up the series. So if you're somebody that likes to binge, I think it's on HBO Max, and you can binge the entire show in one long weekend.
Cool. Last question. What are you most grateful for?
I'm most grateful for my support system. So I already mentioned my girlfriend and some of the mentors in Jeff and my dad, but really just my family, my friends, the people that are around me are insanely supportive. I always laugh because anytime Diadem launches a new product, I get a bunch of texts from family members and, hey, can I buy one? Where do I go? What do I need to do? Who do I send money to? I just have an insanely great support system, and that's something you can't buy, you can't work hard for it. It's just something to be really grateful for.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, hey, thanks for coming in today, Michael. Enjoyed talking with you. Best of luck in the future.
We appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in to Locality's Making Bank podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to catch the latest episodes, and visit localitybank.com today to learn more about all the benefits of banking local.